Have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Dasha, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the May 7th to the May 13th issues of the Batavia Daily News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Starting back in time, on the 7th, community members rally for International Workers' Day by Ben Beagle. About 36 people gathered outside the city center on Main Street to rally on International Workers' Day. Protesters spoke about civil rights, speaking up for democracy, and speaking out against billionaires and for the working class. They also spoke against the actions of immigration and customs enforcement and other issues. Today is a day where we celebrate and recognize workers worldwide, not the people in the C-suite or on Wall Street, the people in the daycares and the classrooms and cubicles, mines and factories, hospitals and clinics and nursing homes, the people in tractors and tractor trailers, on boom trucks, in mail trucks and trains and boats, said Lauren Berger, a member of the Livingston County Democratic Socialists of America and one of 3 speakers at the May 1 event. These are the people who built our communities, and we've been getting the short end of the stick for a long time, way before Donald Trump came along, she said. Around 35 people gathered in Batavia at 1 p.m. for the 2-hour rally organized by GLOW Community Alliance and Genesee County Democratic Socialists of America. It was one of several similar events that took place in the GLOW region on May 1st and 2nd. Those events joined thousands that were planned across the nation through May 3rd. The message at the rallies was workers over billionaires, according to organizers. May 1st is a significant date in the history of the United States labor rights movement, which dates back to the late 1800s, when laborers first protested for 8-hour workdays. First commemorated in 1890, workers around the world observe May 1st, known as International Workers' Day or May Day, to honor the contributions of working people and to fight for better working conditions. The date was selected to acknowledge the Haymarket Affair in Chicago, an 1886 eruption of violence at a strike for the 8-hour workday, which killed and injured demonstrators, police, and onlookers. Flyers for the Batavia event, with its theme, May Day, Together We Stand, said it was organized to show unity behind an agenda that puts workers first. The agenda included taxing the rich so families, not corporations, fortunes came first, no ICE, no war, no private army serving authoritarian power, and to expand democracy, not corporate rule, by demanding free, fair elections and the right to a union. Local attorney Jane Schmieder of Bethany co-hosted the rally on behalf of the GLOW Community Alliance. Our local community is full of good, decent, hard-working citizens who are appalled by recent government actions, Schmieder said, noting the war in Iran, abusive actions by immigration and customs enforcement, and detention of immigrants, and cuts to social welfare programs. Our democracy and our election integrity are severely threatened, she said. People want to show their opposition to a government which has turned against us and against all nations, she said. We want to exercise our right to peaceful protest in the heart of our community. Others came to oppose the Trump administration, the war in Iran, and comment on the implications of the recent Supreme Court decision in Louisiana versus Calais. We are appalled to watch our erratic administration, who we elected to continue to cause chaos and backsliding in our social programs, Schmieder said in remarks at the rally. 2 days ago, our Supreme Court did it again. They demolished the Voting Rights Act of 1965, crown jewel of the civil rights movement, a law that went far to prevent racial discrimination and redistricting of all levels of electoral districts. Now, the Supreme Court is saying racial gerrymandering of districts is okay, and it is okay for partisan politics, Republicans versus Democrats, to redraw again mid-decade electoral district lines so either side can get more congressional seats and legislative seats. This is supposed to happen every 10 years. Now it's chaos, a power grab at the state level. And these redraws will wipe out some of our hard-won minority diversity representation. But this is America. We are good, hard-working, decent, fair people. Logan Cole, Secretary of Genesee County DSA, spoke on how democracy means more than voting for the working class. Democracy is having a say in how society is organized, Cole said. As such, the United States does not fully realize its ostensible status as a democracy. The wealthy have an outsized influence on how society is run because they can spend money to exert such influence, he said, noting the proposed data center at WNY Stamp in the town of Alabama. Mostly working people across the political spectrum oppose this construction, but the wealthy, including those in Jeffrey Epstein's circles, and those local officials that have aligned with them, keep these data center projects afloat. Luckily, the Stomp Stamp movement has shown up at community meetings and town halls and has been winning. This is the practice of democracy. Sometimes democracy is not given, but rather taken. This is what we are doing today. Demonstrations like this one are us taking democracy. Berger's remarks focused on thinking beyond the current administration to address working-class issues at their root causes. The struggle for safe and fair working conditions and many other rights has been hard fought, and it isn't even over, but Berger said. No matter which party's in the White House, we have to lobby and advocate and fight for the gains we have. Berger decried an economic system that rewards insatiable greed, a system that produces houses of government where more than half the body are millionaires, and where election spending is so out of control you can't touch a House or Senate without a six-figure purse. She called Trump a symptom of unchecked greed and policy choices that favor the ultra-wealthy. We stop the next Trump, and the need to mobilize other election cycle is to change the system for the better, Berger said. Demand policy change for the working people and families from all politicians, no matter the party. Schmader said the May 1st event was the fourth protest in Batavia in the last year. About 70 people attended a rally May 1st in Geneseo, organized by Genesee Valley Indivisible, while about 40 people participated in a May 2nd gathering in Geneseo that included an open mic. Wyoming County Indivisible had a May Day rally on May 2nd in Perry that saw about 25 people attend. A rally also took place May 2nd in Hemlock that was hosted by Hemlock Rising. On the opinion page on the 7th, another view, America needs affordable cars. An editorial from the Chicago Tribune. Need some new wheels? You can buy a 2026 J-Coupe J5 compact SUV for the equivalent of just $18,400 out the door, all fees and taxes included, and with a list of features that includes keyless entry, LED lighting, 6-speaker audio, adaptive cruise control, and an 8-year warranty, if you're lucky enough to live in Australia. Here in America, the search for a new car with a sticker price under $20,000 offers you a choice of precisely one vehicle out of hundreds to be found at your local dealership. That would be the bare-bones Nissan Versa, still far more expensive than the J-Coupe, once destination and other fees are added. The cheapest compact SUV on offer in the U.S., well, that's most likely the Mitsubishi Eclipse Cross, costing at least $30,000 out the door. If you get suckered into the extended warranty, probably more. Aussies who are sick of the elevated price of gas, by the way, can buy an electric version of that J-Coupe J5 for just $5,000 more, massively undercutting Hyundai's Kona Electric, likely the cheapest electric SUV you can find in the U.S. Why the disparity? The simple answer is that U.S. automakers decided the best way to combat the rising costs of unionized labor, which has secured massive gains, and ballooning material expenses, was to chase the higher profit margins that come from the bigger SUVs, now the vehicle of choice for a broad swath of Americans. We'd also add that decades of protectionist policies in the U.S. auto industry and a lack of fresh competition have not exactly been to the advantage of American consumers. The numbers above certainly tell that story. The average price of a new vehicle in the U.S. has shot north of $50,000, a figure unaffordable for a large number of U.S. households, who find themselves trapped in increasingly daunting finance contracts. According to Edmunds, some 23% of car buyers in the first quarter of this year agreed to a loan of 84 months or longer. A decade ago, that was just 10%. And of course, any attempt to replace a car within that time is likely to result in negative equity, meaning that car buyers have to finance not just their new car, but the remaining balance on the car they're trading in for that fresh buy. So, for many middle-class Americans, the choice is between a dangerous amount of debt or no new car at all. Hardly an ideal situation. U.S. automakers know all of this, of course, and this has led to a frantic effort to stop Chinese vehicles from arriving on U.S. shores. The cars already can be found at Mexican new car dealers, some located not far from the U.S. border, in both California and Texas. The Trump administration has slapped heavy tariffs on these Chinese vehicles, close to 250%, and unleashed other weapons to protect U.S. dealers and manufacturers, including regulatory bans on some Chinese-developed software used in the vehicles. That's bad news in turn for some U.S. manufacturers like Tesla, since China has retaliated in the trade war. Those Chinese vehicles can, though legally, be driven into the U.S. by Mexican residents with Mexican driving licenses, and that has the U.S. auto dealers worried that folks in California are seeing these cars, hearing about how little they cost, and starting to rebel against high U.S. prices. The Wall Street Journal reported last week that several U.S. senators and House members have been making rumblings, not just about banning the stateside sale of Chinese-made Mexican cars, but going so far as not allowing Mexican or Canadian drivers to bring them into the country at all, something of a drastic step. Given China's adversarial relationship with the U.S. and its history of strategic dumping for non-market reasons, a good case can be made that it is not in our national interest to open our huge market to these vehicles, especially since today's internet-connected cars are essentially computers on wheels, transmitting and receiving all kinds of information. Nonetheless, prohibiting international drivers from bringing their own cars into the country feels motivated not so much by worries about national security, but by fear that American consumers will catch sight of these vehicles, do a cost-benefit analysis, and wonder why they can't buy one here. After all, even if you take the U.S. automakers at their word when they say they couldn't compete with this kind of pricing, and we do, let's remember that nobody forced Detroit to give United Auto Workers the deal they won. Anyone could see at the time this would greatly increase prices. That is exactly what has happened. But if protection is what most of them are demanding, U.S. automakers then have an obligation to pay attention to the market and start building more affordable cars. We've essentially ended up now with an industry that caters almost entirely to the affluent consumer, meaning that a new car, once an essential part of the American dream, has become unaffordable and unattainable to far too many Americans, forcing them into the used car market where the risks are higher. That should not be the case. We need far more U.S.-made automobiles that Americans can afford to buy without moving to Australia. And a letter to the editor on the 7th from Mary Eisenhardt of Leroy. Data centers do not employ many workers. Stream claims that the facility will employ 125 workers in permanent positions, but lower pay-level jobs can be filled by temp agencies rather than direct full-time employees. Many of the higher-paid technical jobs can be done remotely. These workers won't be adding to the local economy. Another concern is that GCEDC and Stream are refusing to disclose the name of the company who will actually be running the data center. This means we cannot trust any claims about numbers of workers, pay rates, kinds of jobs, or local hiring policies. Furthermore, huge tax abatements are involved for a multi-billion-dollar corporation, which makes no sense at all. Communities across the nation are vigorously fighting against them. Daily, there are national news articles about how capital-intensive investments and their minimal labor footprint have generated substantial fiscal consequences. The tax abatement ratio to jobs is so lopsided that they must be re-evaluated. Illinois is introducing the Power Act to require data centers to fund their own grid infrastructure, and they are suspending state tax incentives. Erie County Executive Poloncarz emphatically states tax breaks should only be provided to create jobs, not invest in fewer jobs. Data centers are simply not a good investment for our local community. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Batavia Daily News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. From the Friday, May 8th issue, Blakeman lays out all of the above energy policy by Alex Galt. Energy prices across New York are climbing and currently sit almost 70% higher than the national average. Bruce R. Blakeman, the Republican candidate for governor this year, has a plan that he says will change that. Standing alongside most of the state Senate and Assembly Republican conferences, Blakeman and the state's GOP leaders blasted Democrats and Governor Kathleen C. Hochul for backing policies they say are driving up the cost of energy in New York, especially efforts to electrify more buildings across the state and decarbonize the energy grid. When you examine your energy bill and look at it, only 30% of your payment actually goes to energy, he said. The rest goes to excessive delivery fees, more taxes because they tax your utility bills, and the green energy scam. It is a scam. Blakeman blasted the renewable energy facilities that have gone up across New York. Solar facilities, he says, are covered in snow most of the winter. Offshore wind farms, he says, are among the most expensive per megawatt of generated power in the world, as well as the state's now decades-long block on extracting natural gas from the Marcellus Shale in the southern tier. Kathy Hochul is hell-bent on making us all electric when we know it's a pipe dream. We know it can't happen, he said. Blakeman supports ending the moratorium on fracking and other methods of natural gas extraction. He argued that the boom of natural gas wells in northern Pennsylvania on that state's share of the Marcellus Shale have driven an economic boom in northern Pennsylvania that could be felt in the southern tier, too. When you drive along the southern tier of this state, if you go to the Pennsylvania side, people are happy. They're prosperous, he said. They've got new roads, new buildings. They're driving around in brand new Cadillac Escalades. You go on the other side of the border in New York, it's poverty, it's despair. People are driving around in 25-year-old rusted-out pickup trucks. The data doesn't seem to back up Blakeman's argument. While the counties in northern Pennsylvania that host natural gas wells did see a 50% bump in their GDP between 2008 and 2020, the region actually lost over 3% of its jobs in the same time period, and natural gas is increasing in price and is expected to only get more expensive. In Pennsylvania, the state's reliance on natural gas to heat homes and run power plants means that those increasing prices are putting pressure on residents' energy bills. And as the infrastructure to move more of that Pennsylvania gas to other markets was built up, more and more of it was sent to markets willing to pay higher prices for it. The Ohio River Valley Institute found that about 90% of the revenue from the industry left the state. There is a good deal more to this article, and if you would like to hear it, you can call 716-821-5555, and staff will be happy to read it to you. Friday's Another View is from the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Heckler's veto still plagues college campuses. If you're afraid to let your opponent talk, you probably aren't winning the debate. But it's also hard to win the war of ideas when your audience can't hear you. Last month, UCLA's Federalist Society hosted James Percival, General Counsel for the Department of Homeland Security. That seems a natural fit. Law students could learn a lot from the top lawyer of a major government agency. But campus leftists weren't interested in a discussion. Many of the attendees disrupted Percival's speech, heckling him with jeers and boos. They also used sound effects, presumably from their phones, to disrupt them, according to news reports. After being asked to silence their phones, attendees then clicked pens and tapped on desks, the Daily Bruin reported. By giving Mr. Percival a platform, the Federalist Society and UCLA Law are legitimizing and normalizing racially discriminatory policies that are actively harming both UCLA students and our broader community, read a letter signed by 18 UCLA law student organizations. UCLA's law school is supposedly a prestigious institution. U.S. News & World Report ranked it 13th best in the nation. Yet many of its students aren't demonstrating even an elementary grasp of free speech. That statement shows the mental gymnastics that some leftists use to equate speech with violence. They argue that a certain policy is detrimental. Allowing that policy to be discussed, therefore, does violence to the alleged victim group. To prevent this supposed violence, leftists must shut down conversations they don't approve of. That UCLA and other law schools are churning out future judges is deeply concerning. So was the reaction of UCLA's administration. Instead of punishing students who don't respect the right to express diverse viewpoints, Barracks Marti, a UCLA dean, warned the Federalist Society not to identify the disruptive students. After being publicly exposed, UCLA reversed itself. This isn't just a California problem. In February 2024, Professor Asaf Pir, an Israeli from Bar Ilan University, attempted to give a physics lecture at UNLV. His talk was interrupted by people screaming at him about Israel. Instead of removing the anti-free speech agitators, UNLV police escorted Pir off campus. What makes this even more outrageous is that both UCLA and UNLV are public universities. Free speech should be foundational. Yes, freedom of expression applies to hecklers too. But caving to the heckler's veto teaches many students that rather than learn reasoned and respectful debate, it's easier to shout down and intimidate the opposition. A handful of colleges have made strides attempting to welcome more diverse ideas beyond progressive orthodoxy. But on many campuses, much work remains. From the Saturday, May 9th edition, Wyoming County sues over former Bliss store, by Saul Hauser. Wyoming County is seeking to force the owner of a dilapidated former grocery store in the center of Bliss to clean the property up. In a lawsuit filed Wednesday in Wyoming County Supreme Court, the county building department requested a court order requiring the listed owner, Jason Nosbich of Lancaster, to exterminate a rat infestation, remove garbage, and fix the roof structure, and windows of the two-story brick building at 3391 Main Street, and to allow a county inspector inside. Neighbors have long complained about the building, describing rats, structural damage, and an interior filled with garbage obtained by Jason Nosbich's mother, Ruth Nosbich, also of Lancaster. The conditions are similar to those in at least 7 other properties across Wyoming, Erie, and Allegheny counties, currently and formerly used by Ruth Nosbich. Her properties in Bliss, Pike, Silver Springs, Wyoming, Clarence, Holland, Lancaster, and Friendship have drawn complaints of piles of clutter, abandoned vehicles, structural deterioration, and rodent infestations. Among those properties is the former high roller skating rink in Pike, which burned last May in a 6-hour blaze that drew 20 fire departments from 5 counties. The Pike property is subject to a separate cleanup order issued in April by Wyoming County Supreme Court Judge Donald O'Green, requiring that Nosbich clear the wreckage from the site by November 1st. Bliss residents have raised concerns for years that Nosbich property could suffer a similar fate. "We had to put rat poison around our whole house," neighbor Nicole Lancaster told the Daily News in a January interview. "The guy next to it did the same. You'd walk past and see rats in the window. You couldn't even walk on the sidewalk." Wyoming County Sheriff's deputies responded to Nosbich's properties in the county 11 times between 2019 and 2025, including a 2020 call from a neighbor about a barrel of garbage left burning unattended behind the Bliss building. Reached by police at the time, Nosbich said she had set the fire and returned home to Lancaster. Speaking to the Daily News in January, Wyoming County Fire Coordinator Bill Stryker said his office considers the property a serious risk. "It does pose a hazard on 2 levels, Stryker said at the time. It's in the hamlet of Bliss, so nearby structures are very close by, and again, the fire load in that structure could spread rapidly. You have a potential of possibly burning downtown Bliss down." Tuesday's lawsuit follows months of attempts to push Nosbich to clean up the property. The county issued its first notice of violation on November 3rd, 2025. After Nosbich failed to respond to that letter, the county issued a second notice on January 16th, also to no avail. While the deed to the property is in the name of Jason Nosbich, his brother, Wes, said in January that the building is used by Ruth Nosbich. Several people connected to Ruth Nosbich said she has registered properties in the names of children and an ex-husband without their full understanding. Wes, who is not on speaking terms with his mother, said at the time that he and his brother Jason wanted to clean out the Bliss property and repurpose it for use as a smoke shop or antique store, but their mother won't allow it. "Jason wants to make that building into his house or a shop," Wes said at the time, "but she keeps getting in the way. He has asked her for the keys. It's in his name, and she refuses to give them to him." The former Bliss store and high roller rink were well known in their respective areas and widely used at the time, whether for buying groceries or an afternoon of family fun, respectively. Neither Jason nor Ruth Nosbich could be reached for comment as of press time Friday night. From Saturday's opinion page, we have Trump's judicial nominees are fact-challenged and unfit by Jackie Calms of the Los Angeles Times. Who won the 2020 election? Was the Capitol attacked on January 6, 2021? Can Donald Trump be elected to a third term as president? No-brainers, right? The answers are, of course, Joe Biden, yes and no. Any fact and reality-based American would say so. But that humongous class of people pointedly doesn't include the President of the United States. And apparently, for that reason, his nominees for federal judgeships, the very jobs which you'd most want fact-based individuals, hem, haw, stammer, and ultimately decline to give direct answers when Democratic senators test them with such easy-peasy questions at confirmation hearings. One after another, month after month, Trump nominees for district and appeals courts across the land say the answers to the questions are matters of debate, of significant political dispute. Well, they're in dispute only because Trump says they are, as does every ambitious office holder and office seeker desperate to remain in the retributive ruler's good graces, including, alas, would-be judges. To watch them squirm and then squirt out the same rehearsed reply, the same legalistic word salad, just like the dozens of nominees before them, would be hilarious if it weren't so ominous for the rule of law in the nation. Trump nominees for other high-ranking jobs, likewise prepped for the Senate Democrats' questions by their Trump handlers, give the same rote response. But the fact that candidates for lifetime seats on the federal bench, making decisions of life-changing consequences for millions of Americans, would choose to dodge the truth is most sickening. In their truth trolling to keep Trump happy lest he yank their chance at a new black robes, these candidates fail the test of judicial independence. As one Democrat, Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut, told 4 district court judges last week at a Senate Judiciary Committee hearing, their humiliating hedging on an issue of fact, Biden won in 2020, reflects not only on your honesty, but really on your fitness to be a federal judge. Indeed, that judicial nominee would curry Trump's favor, bodes ill for future federal jurisprudence in the one branch of government that stood up for the rule of law against Trump repeatedly when Congress and the Supreme Court have not. To be fair, a number of judges confirmed in Trump's first term have been among the many who've ruled against his and his administration's second-term abuses of power. Yet just as Trump has populated his cabinet and executive branch with sycophants, unlike in Trump 1.0, he's obviously applying new litmus tests to potential judges. One of them, clearly, is playing along with his electioning lies. His nominee's failure to speak truth to Trump's power should be disqualifying. But they're not disqualified because the Senate is run by Republicans who share their fear of him. That fact is a big reason to hope that Democrats capture the majority in November's midterm elections, and that under new management, the Senate will finally take seriously its constitutional advice and consent responsibility to act as a check on Trump nominees for the final 2 years of his term, including perhaps one for the Supreme Court. And yes, this is Trump's final term. For all of his teasing about Trump 2028, the Constitution's 22nd Amendment says as much in its opening line: no person shall be elected to the office of the president more than twice. Yet the 4 wannabe district judges at last week's Senate Judiciary Committee confirmation hearing, Michael J. Hendershot of Ohio, Arthur Roberts Jones, and John G.E. Mark, both of Texas, and Jeffrey T. Kuntz of Florida, struggled over that clear language. All 4 hesitated when Senator Chris Coons, a Delaware Democrat, asked them to describe the amendment. He even read its initial words before querying Mark, "Is President Trump eligible to run for president again in 2028? Mark paused, then sputtered, "Senator, without considering all the facts and looking at everything, depending on what the situation is, this, to me, strikes as more of a hypothetical of something that could be raised." "It's not a hypothetical," Coons countered, and then asked again whether Trump is eligible to run for a third term under our Constitution. I would have to review the actual wording of it," Mark blabbered. Coon turned to the others. "Anybody else brave enough to say that the Constitution of the United States prevents President Trump from seeking a third term?" Silence. "Anybody willing to apply the Constitution by its plain language in the 22nd Amendment?" Coons persisted. Crickets. His Democratic colleague Blumenthal inquired of the foursome, "Who won the 2020 election?" All agreed in turn that Biden was certified the winner. No one would say that he won because, as we and they know, Trump insists to this day that he won. He's turned the power of his Justice Department to trying to prove that obvious falsehood. Far be it from these future judges to contradict the president who nominated them. Here's Hendershot's gibberish to Blumenthal's simple query. Senator, I want to be mindful of the canons here. I know this question has come up many times in these hearings, and it's become an issue of significant political dispute and debate. And so with that, I would say that President Biden was certified the winner of the 2020 election. After the others replied similarly, Blumenthal turned justifiably scathing. It's pretty irrefutable that Joe Biden won the election, but you're unwilling to use that word because you are afraid. You are afraid of what? President Trump? That is exactly what we do not need on the federal bench today. We need jurists who are fearless and strong, not weak and pathetic. Apparently unshamed, each similarly demurred when he asked if the Capitol had been attacked. You've seen the videos, have you not? Blumenthal blurted. No matter, Senator. These would-be triers of fact apparently won't believe their eyes, not when their patron, the president, insists on lies. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Batavia Daily News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The deep dive on Saturday as data centers descend on needy upstate New York towns. Is Anyone Looking Out for Us? By Tim Nouse. Across New York, the owners of vacant industrial properties are turning to data centers, an old gun factory in the Mohawk Valley, a dormant industrial park in Genesee County, a vacant aluminum plant in the North Country, a former coal plant near Niagara Falls. In these and other communities, developers and civic leaders are testing whether relics of long-dead industries can be replaced by one of the hottest new technologies. New York has been slow to the exploding market in data centers, but our turn is here. As big money players move in, who will look out for New Yorkers? Data centers are ready to scarf up huge quantities of New York electricity, but key decisions about their developments have been left to small-town officials. They'll be tempted by a jolt in local property tax revenue and asked to overlook that the projects create relatively few jobs. It is a critical moment. More than 30 so-called hyperscale data centers have rushed into New York, seeking permission to connect to the grid. If they all get built, they would use more power than Ireland. That could tax a power grid that already shows signs of stress. It could raise energy prices that already run high. But state officials are just beginning to study how to accommodate them. Governor Kathy Hochul in February ordered the State Public Service Commission, which regulates electric utilities, to start a year-long review of potential data center regulations. The PSC staff has until next February to put suggestions out for public comment. For now, it's up to the volunteers on rural planning and development bodies and the nonprofit organization that runs the grid to decide whether these projects are good for New Yorkers. The path to approval for a data center requires little public disclosure or state oversight compared with, say, a generating station of similar size. Developers do not have to reveal who will actually operate the data center. Anonymous limited liability companies can apply to connect to the grid without revealing who controls them. Without a statewide approach, the destiny of data centers in New York will be left to development-starved small communities like the one in Mohawk Valley. That's where Herkimer County lawmakers agreed to loan $2.5 million to help a tentative data center plan at the former Remington Arms gun factory. We're trying to stay positive here in the Valley, said legislator Greg Malta, who chairs the Planning and Development Committee. We have to try and spur something up and get investors in here. Data centers are buildings that house large numbers of computer servers and related equipment that store, process, and transmit digital information. They can serve a variety of functions from internet service and email to streaming media and artificial intelligence. Small data centers have been around for decades. New York has dozens. But in the era of artificial intelligence, the size of data centers has grown exponentially. The giant facilities known as hyperscale data centers, usually drawing 100 megawatts or more, are relatively new. The bigger the electric connection, the more computing power, and the more valuable the data center. They are called hyperscale for good reason. They cost billions to build, they take up acres of space, and they consume oceans of electricity. In western New York, for example, a Texas company is working to build a data center at a county-owned industrial park near Batavia. It would use 500 megawatts of electricity, enough for more than 500,000 average upstate households. Stream Data Centers plans to spend $19.5 billion with a B, to build the 2.2 million square foot data center at the Science, Technology, and Advanced Manufacturing Park, or STAMP. That's big, but not the biggest. A developer in St. Lawrence County is looking to site 2 data centers totaling 2,800 megawatts, enough power for 2.8 million upstate homes. New York's electric grid is already expensive and under strain. Without significant new power supplies to balance demand, the system will become increasingly unreliable and prone to price spikes, according to the New York Independent System Operator. Twice during the past year, extreme weather events have pushed the electric system to the brink, spiking wholesale prices and forcing grid operators to bring in expensive power from out of state. In both cases, a June heat wave and a January cold snap, geriatric generating plants failed to come online when called upon. Based on how the system behaved this winter and last summer, the need for new resources is now, said Kevin Lanahan, a vice president, NYISO. Even without data centers, New York utility customers face the likelihood of gradually increasing bills. Shoring up the aging electric grid will require new power supplies, substations, and transmission lines that don't come cheap. The rush to build data centers threatens to multiply those costs, and soon. Each project brings an appetite for electricity comparable to a small city, ratcheting up demand at a time when supplies are stagnant. But the people who approve data centers have no obligation to consider those energy costs we all pay. The nonprofit that manages the electric grid, the New York Independent System Operator, studies data center requests and advises the local utility on whether it's safe to connect a data center. The NYISO mandate is to evaluate the physical effects on moving the power across the system, not the cost. When a town board or county development agency reviews a data center site plan, they look at how it will affect neighbors and taxpayers, not statewide utility costs or air emissions. At a time when large data center loads require focus and planning, the responsibility for regulating them is disjointed. The Public Service Commission's investigation could eventually result in tighter regulation. The case has attracted a staggering amount of public comment. In less than 3 months, and before there are any proposals on the table, more than 10,000 comments have been filed. But it could take a year or more for the PSC to act. For now, critics say, it's not clear that the rules for building data centers are sufficient to protect New Yorkers. They're under-regulated, said Mandy DeRoche, an environmental attorney for Earth Justice, who has fought data centers in court. We're making rushed decisions without enough information about so much. In theory, data center companies could help strengthen the grid. They have plenty of money to invest. They've shown a willingness to pay extra for power. In Wisconsin, the Public Service Commission last month approved a special very large customer utility rate that obligates data centers for 15 years to pay 100% of the cost of new generation and transmission investments required to serve them. Officials at National Grid say that, if done thoughtfully, data center development could be tapped to pay for new power plants and beefed up infrastructure that would benefit all New York customers. Data centers are customers that want an upgraded, reliable system and have the means to support infrastructure improvements and offset costs that would have otherwise been paid for by other customers and communities, said Matthew Satterwhite, head of U.S. Policy and Regulatory Strategy for the utility. Among options to be considered by the PSC, data centers could be forced to pay special high rates or to stop operating whenever power supplies run short. But where will all the extra power to serve them come from? The answer in Wisconsin and many states is natural gas. Enormous new natural gas power plants are being built to meet the demand, a trend that will add new greenhouse gas emissions for decades to come. New York, which has aggressive climate goals, has discouraged gas plants. Hochul this year declared the future to be nuclear plants, but those are potentially costly and likely a decade away from operation. In a state where the governor and legislators are fighting over how to secure the state's energy future, data centers heighten the need for a consistent policy. Satterwhite, the National Grid executive, said future economic development depends on having a clear strategy. No business wants to build in a location if they suspect the rules of the road will be changed along the way, he said. Hyperscale data centers have submitted more than 30 requests to connect to the New York grid. That's the first step in getting permission to build. The NYISO studies each request to determine whether the load can be accommodated without throwing the system out of balance. Because of the size of the data centers, connecting to the grid may require new infrastructure such as substations or transmission lines. Utilities are required to make the data centers pay for those. The second step for a data center is to get a site permit. In most cases, the review falls to a rural town government, many of which have never dealt with anything of the same magnitude as a data center. As I said, this is the deep dive, and there's still quite a bit more of this article. So if you want to hear more, please call 716-821-5555, and staff will be happy to read it to you. Turning to the paper on Tuesday, Wyoming County aims to buy former Camp Wyomoko. Beloved summer camp was placed for sale in 2024 by Matt Sertel. The former Camp Wyomoko was a place of summer memories, and it may be again if a plan to turn the location into a county park comes to fruition. The Wyoming County Board of Supervisors has approved applying for the $2 million in State Department of Environmental Conservation funding to buy the 287-acre former 4-H camp on 2780 Buffalo Road. In the short term, the goal is to protect the open space and resources that the property contains, with the thought of utilizing these resources in the development of a regional park, said County Administrator Scott Schrader in response to emailed questions. If the county is successful in obtaining the grant to acquire the property, again, in the short term, we would open the space for public use with passive county management and maintenance. In essence, the public would be able to utilize the property for day hikes, fishing, field use, etc., but not for overnight camping or facility use. The Cornell Cooperative Extension of Wyoming County announced in June 2024 what it described as a difficult decision, Camp Wyomoko, due to declining enrollment and increasing employment and maintenance costs. Although the camp's regular season was canceled for 3 consecutive years during the COVID-19 pandemic, it had been experiencing challenges for several years beforehand, according to a March 2023 CCE resolution weighing the camp's sale. Wyoming County has executed a letter of intent to purchase the property for the current listed price of $1.75 million, including all furnishings, fixtures, and equipment contingent upon receiving a DEC open space preservation grant, Schrader said. There would be no cost to the county to consummate the purchase, he said. If the county does not receive the grant, then the county will not purchase the property. Any work done to the property would be through grants or volunteers if the purchase is successful, he said. As it currently stands, there's no intention of utilizing property tax revenue for the maintenance or improvements to the park by the County Board of Supervisors, Schrader said. A purchase agreement is being drafted between the Wyoming County and the Cornell Cooperative Extension of Wyoming County in anticipation of the grant being awarded, with the state's decision being expected by midsummer, he said. The Camp Wyomoko property, which includes a 30 square foot main lodge equipped with a full commercial kitchen, a 1,488 square foot residential lodge featuring 6 bedrooms and 3 full bathrooms, a 510 square foot camp office with a half bath, and a 640 square foot health lodge with an accessible half bath and bedroom. Additional structures include a 1,056 square foot 2-story former trading post with a fully accessible bath and shower, a 682 square foot former staff lounge and camp store, a 2,228 square foot learning and nature center pole barn, and a 672 square foot director's cabin with a full bath. The camp also features 18 rustic cabins, a 3,000 square foot horse barn, and a 1,008 square foot maintenance shed with associated equipment. Outdoor amenities include an archery and shooting range, 2 shower and bath houses, an outdoor basketball court, a 3-acre pond. It would be our expectation to be able to offer the property to public access in the beginning of 2027, Schrader said. This will allow the county to formalize agreements with a not-for-profit entity to provide trail development and maintenance by volunteers. Camp Wamoko opened in 1964 on Buffalo Road. It became a beloved summer tradition for 4-H'ers and youngsters from Wyoming County and beyond. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Batavia Daily News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Enrollment is underway for the CRP program. Application deadline is May 29th for producers and landowners. The Grassland Conservation Reserve Program. Agricultural producers and private landowners can enroll in the program through May 29th. It helps participants conserve grasslands while also continuing most grazing and haying practices. Grassland CRP emphasizes support for grazing operations, plant and animal biodiversity, and grasslands and land with shrubs, and something under the greatest threat of conversion. Forbes, I don't know. Our grassland CRP enrollment will be competitive, just like our previous enrollment periods, since we're very close to the 27 million acre statutory cap, said FSA Administrator Bill Beam in a news release. Grassland CRP is designed to strike a balance between the importance of continued agricultural productivity and prioritizing the stewardship of America's ecologically significant grasslands. The CRP is USDA's flagship conservation program, the official said. It provides financial and technical support to agricultural producers and landowners who place unproductive or marginal cropland under contract for 10 to 15 years, and who agree to voluntarily convert the land to beneficial vegetative cover to improve water quality, prevent soil erosion, and support wildlife habitat. More than 26.2 million acres are enrolled in CRP, with nearly 10.3 million acres in grassland CRP. Producers and landowners are interested in participating in the CRP are advised to contact their local FSA county office before the May 29th deadline. Also from the Tuesday paper, Hochul fends off critics over tax credit program by Kayla Bamberger from the New York Daily News. Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, on Monday defended herself against criticism from labor allies and members of her own party over her intent to opt into the GOP's federal tax credit scholarship program, which would help families pay for private schools and other educational expenses. New York's participation in the scholarship program is a non-starter for the state's and city's teacher unions, who contend the program takes students and public dollars away from local public schools. The governor disagrees with that characterization. This money, she said during an unrelated news conference in Midtown East, it's not public dollars that could have been going to public schools or now going to private schools. It's not how it works. Under the program, American taxpayers can receive dollar-for-dollar credits of up to $1,700 for donations to approved nonprofits that grant scholarships. The organizations then offer financial support for private or religious school tuition, tutoring, after-school programs, classroom supplies, and other school-related costs. Families who earn up to 300% of their area's median income, or a maximum of $309,000 in New York City, would be eligible, including those who are already paying for private schools. The program was launched as part of President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, but requires states to opt in for families to participate. Dozens of Republican-led states have signed up, but only one Democratic governor has given the official green light so far, Governor Jared Polis of Colorado. Other Democratic governors, including Hochul, have said they are waiting on more information from the federal government before formally opting in, including if the dollars can be used to the benefit of public schools. I want to see what the regulations look like, Hochul said at the news conference. Because if it says something that's detrimental to public schools, for example, saying none of this money can be used for a public school, that's a big issue for me. That's a big issue. The governor even suggested that teachers' unions could become scholarship-granting nonprofits, though it's unclear if labor organizations would meet the federal statutory requirements for the tax credit program. The program was billed by the Trump administration as an effort to promote school choice through what officials have dubbed the Education Freedom Tax Credit. I've encouraged our labor leaders for months now to say, why don't you become a scholarship organization that people can contribute to, or some other entity, or to public schools? Hochul's support for the scholarship program comes as she runs for re-election against GOP nominee Bruce Blakeman, who has criticized the governor for not opting in sooner. But it's likely to drive a wedge between Hochul and the United Federation of Teachers and New York State United Teachers, both of which quickly released statements Friday criticizing the governor's intent to participate. The Wednesday, May 13th issue has a front page article, Schools Eye Staff Cuts in Proposed Budgets. Districts cite declining enrollment, increasing costs and responsibilities, by Saul Hauser. 3 of Genesee County's 9 school districts plan to cut teaching positions this year, citing declining enrollment and revenue struggles. Alexander, Leroy, and Oakfield, Alabama school districts have all proposed faculty and staff cuts in their 2026 to 2027 budgets. Leroy will lose 11 positions through attrition, eliminating positions when they become vacant, while Oakfield, Alabama will cut 9 positions through attrition and reorganization, and Alexander will cut 14 positions through layoffs. At Alexander, the cuts will include 9 teachers, 1 English teacher, 1 social studies teacher, and 1 math teacher at the middle and high school level, and 6 elementary teachers, split between general education, special education, and STEAM, short for science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math, as well as 3 teacher aides currently working at the middle and high school level, 1 mental health professional, and the director of curriculum and instruction. The library media specialist will also become a part-time position with hours cut by 20%. The cuts will result in fewer class options, including the elimination of library and STEAM classes for elementary school students. Classes will also be larger, though Superintendent Jessica Torrey says class sizes will remain under 25 students. Speaking by phone Tuesday evening, Torrey said that rising costs have forced the school to confront a long-term decline in enrollment. We worked hard in this budget to maintain strong academic programs, opportunities for students in music, arts, athletics, and extracurricular activities, and a safe and supportive learning environment, she said. Even during challenging financial times, our goal is to protect opportunities for students. While the cuts may have been motivated by increased costs, declining enrollment means they're not likely to be reversed, even if financial pressure eases, Torrey said. To put it into perspective, the number of seniors that we have currently is in the mid-60s, and we have 34 students registered for kindergarten next year, she said. There are multiple classes in the elementary school that will be going down to 2 sections. It's supported by the enrollment and cohort sizes. The fact is that we have had quite a bit of decreased enrollment, unfortunately, at Alexander, as many other schools in our region are currently facing, she said. It's very important for us, as always, to make sure that we are looking at the challenges that we're facing, taking steps to remain focused on students while being fiscally responsible. Our focus always begins with our students, and every budget decision we make is guided by how it affects student learning and opportunities. There is a good bit more to this with some specific information about particular budgets, which we will be happy to read to you if you want to call 716-821-5555. On Wednesday's opinion page, in another voice, a pivotal moment, New York State should seize the initiative on regulating AI data centers. The editorial was written by the Advanced Media New York editorial board and originally published on Syracuse.com. New York needs to get off the sidelines and start managing the boom in artificial intelligence data centers proposed across the state. As staff writer Tim Naus reported in an article in the Daily News, more than 30 hyperscale data centers drawing 100 megawatts or more have applied for permission to connect to New York's power grid. If all of them are approved, they would use more power than Ireland. Drawing that much electricity out of the state's already constrained power supply could have dire consequences for the reliability of the grid and the cost of energy for everyone else. So why isn't New York out in front of this? New York has little direct control over the state's once sleepy power grid, but it has both the ability and the responsibility to seize the reins at this pivotal moment. As it stands now, Local governments decide whether data centers can or should be built and are incentivized to say yes for the tax revenue they bring in. The nonprofit New York Independent System Operator, which runs the power grid, advises utilities on whether data centers can connect, regardless of whether any higher demand will raise rates for everybody else. The NYISO also advises whether data centers require new infrastructure, such as transmission lines and substations, and utilities figure out how much data centers or ratepayers will pay for them. Now's the story asks, as these fiefdoms decide what's best for themselves, who's watching out for us? That is the legitimate and necessary role of state government, in our view. The state has a duty to protect the interests of all residents. It should shield us from costs imposed by the willy-nilly construction of AI data centers in other communities. Albany's steps to regulate data centers so far have been slow and tentative. In February, Governor Kathy Hochul ordered the State Public Service Commission to start a year-long review of potential data center regulations. Data center developers aren't waiting. Proposed projects are plowing forward in Batavia, in Genesee County, Lansing, in Tompkins County, St. Lawrence County, in the North Country, and at the former Remington Arms factory in Ilion, Herkimer County. Lysander's Town Board voted Thursday to impose a 6-month moratorium on data center development in response to opposition from town residents to the plans of a local developer. In the state legislature, Senator Liz Krueger has proposed a 3-year statewide moratorium on data center development. The time would be used to assess the environmental impacts and to develop regulations protecting ratepayers from energy price spikes. 3 years feels like an eternity in the fast-moving tech economy. The AI data center boom requires urgent action. New York should pass a 1-year moratorium now. It should develop a proper policy and regulatory framework within the next 12 months. New York must address the energy supply side with similar urgency. What is the status of Hochul's January call for 5 gigawatts of new nuclear power generation? How will the state meet the insatiable power needs of AI data centers at the same time Micron will be building semiconductor fabs with similar hyperscale needs? The state also should require more transparency about who's behind these AI data centers. Electricity is a public good that should be available to all, not just billionaire tech moguls. State and local governments should not grant any tax breaks for data centers. The companies financing them are hiding behind limited liability companies and high-priced PR firms. If they really need the tax breaks, they should step out of the shadows and make their case publicly. Taxpayer subsidies are better directed at housing development, not data centers. Beyond the property tax revenue they generate, the economic value of AI data centers to their host communities is negligible. Once they're built, they make no products, have no supply chain, and employ few people. Meanwhile, their energy and environmental costs are borne by other New Yorkers who don't live in those host communities. Local governments are not equipped to make the policy trade-offs necessary to protect all New Yorkers. State government should step in before it's too late. You have been listening to a reading of articles and features from the May 7th through 13th issues of the Batavia Daily News. We read from the Batavia Daily News every Saturday at 9 a.m. Your reader has been Dasha. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the East Aurora Advertiser. At 11 o'clock, we have the Niagara Gazette. And at noon, we have the Dunkirk Observer. Stay with us for these readings and more throughout the day. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which